"Read," commanded the angel Jibreel. "I'm not a reader," replied the man. And Jibreel tightly clasped the man, then released him. "Read," Jibreel said again. "I'm not a reader," repeated the man. Jibreel forcefully clasped the man yet again, then let him go. "Read," Jibreel ordered a third time. "I am not a reader," responded Muhammad. Once again, Jibreel vigorously clasped the man, then set him free and revealed, "Read in the name of your Lord who created humankind from a clot of blood. Read, for your Lord is most bountiful, who taught by the pen, taught humankind what it did not know." Read, well actually Iqra, is the first word of revelation that was received by the Prophet Muhammad from the angel Jibreel. It has everything to do with the significance of seeking knowledge within the Muslim faith and life in general. It is a word not restricted only to a religious journey of enlightenment, but one that Muslims carry throughout their lives in exercising their curiosity, reason, and analysis. Read, in all its contexts, is a word worthy of the final rebirth of the Abrahamic faith. So, if the instruction of reading was and is so fundamental and embedded in both faith and life, then how come Arab Muslims today read so little? With Arabs, oral tradition was the way of telling stories. Only with the advent of the 20th century did Arabs start to generate writings en masse, and even then, the en masse I mentioned was fairly minimal. Arab societies were generally undereducated and struggled with high illiteracy rates, so demand was obviously low. Oral tradition was still the main vehicle to tell stories or relay knowledge, but then, in the mid-20th century, a noticeable shift came into existence. The written word, be it fiction or non-fiction, started to take off. Gradually, one new nation after another started to see its authors, researchers, and poets express and document in written form. But one key factor to take note of was that the Arabic written form had no heritage. Thus, any contemporary Arab author had to look for a means of expression for him or herself, with hardly any guidance to aid them. And by that time, when Arabs were improving both qualitatively and quantitatively in their literature, slowly becoming effective at the process and appreciated for their expression, came the digital world and transformed the written word domain into a new dynamic that was now again totally foreign. So the fledgling Arab literary world was now in limbo, caught in a struggle between developing their own written word and dealing with a new medium. But the question still remained: why didn't Arabs read? There are several factors that contribute to this crisis for Arabs, from the simplest of states of being that are more easily remedied to ones that are much more complex and difficult to overcome. And I want to start with the simplest reasons, the facts and figures. And the most fundamental of all reasons is illiteracy. The Arab world still suffers from this condition. And if we talk averages, then as of 2023, the Arab world has only achieved a literacy rate of 76%, whereas the comparable for Europe stands at 99%, and Southeast Asia at 95%. Now, there are many reasons for this situation that can be self-evident. No funding, a preference of labor for both children and adults over that for education, and so on. I don't want to dwell too much in this video on why illiteracy is so high. So then we go on to the next layer of facts concerning the 76% of Arabs that can read. How much do they read in comparison to the rest of the world? In a report called the Human Development Report issued in 2003 by UNESCO, Arabs read on average a few chapters of a book per annum. And when compared to their European counterparts, that figure was on average 35 books. A further survey issued in 2011 called the Report on Cultural Development, produced by the Arab Thought Foundation, translated the numbers of books read by populations around the world into time. Arabs read for 6 minutes per year, while Europeans 200 hours annually. Further reports since then have positioned the figures much higher in terms of how much Arabs read. These reports, such as the Arab Reading Index generated in 2016, started including the reading of the Quran, books read in schools and universities, as well as newspapers and magazines into the fold. Putting all these numbers and statistics aside though, the fact of the matter is that Arabs still don't read. We don't see them consume books. There are minimal bookshops, people reading around us, libraries that enjoy constant and recurring visitation by readers. And here is where things get a little complicated, when we leave the world of facts and dive into the behavioral reasons or cultural phenomena that don't allow for the engagement of Arabs with books. You see, beyond in the practice of faith or in the pursuit of an education, reading is not really encouraged. And I'd like to illustrate the sequential interactions with reading that Arabs experience throughout their lives. From a very early age, Arab children aren't read to. They don't own the early positive, inspirational, and formative memories when their parents read to them. Reading experiences that could ideally establish real connections between the act of reading and the exercising of one's imagination and the stirring of emotions that subsequently take place. And in parallel, Arab children rarely witness their parents reading for themselves. Children look to imitate the behavior of the adults around them as role models. But with reading, that option mostly never exists. And then they move on to their educational years, when most Arabs are exposed to sterile government-produced textbooks that don't motivate reading. Textbooks that lack any appeal for students in wanting to read more, to discover knowledge, or in sparking curiosity. The educational curriculum further pushes away students from reading, gone as a joy, by reducing year after year the involvement of Arab literature in their structure, while children in Western educational institutions read classic literature throughout their schooling, such as Alice in Wonderland and the Chronicles of Narnia in elementary school, or 1984, Animal Farm, Don Quixote, and The Little Prince in high school. Arab children, on the other hand, are only exposed to limited yet highly difficult works in Fusha Arabic, that's classical Arabic, which in its own right is an obstacle for fluid reading, due to its difficult terminology, structure, and grammar. And by the last years of schooling, literature vanishes entirely from the curriculum. Arab children leave school with, more often than not, a non-existent relationship with reading, in the best case, and a negative impression of it at its worst. When schooling is complete, books take an even lesser role in the lives of Arabs. The reading culture is not part of Arab culture at all. In fact, if one took a book to read on a bus or any public venue, he'd look rather strange. But Arabs do read newspapers, you'd say. We can see them at the cafes or lounges reading the news. Yes, that's true. Many Arabs are voracious consumers of news. The news, though, can be consumed in a group or a communal setting, whereas the consumption of books is done in isolation of others. A solitary activity and hence garners a lower status of importance to society. For Arabs, being in the know supersedes being with knowledge. News is also less demanding time and effort-wise, and that is another behavioral flaw that is characteristic of the general Arab population. Arabs want quick gains, the short version, the bulletin, when one can know what is going on within minutes and even seconds. In principle, let's say reading a book would take a week. For the Arab mindset, who has such time to spare in this day and age? The appetite for the consumption of books is a single part of a larger problem. The other substantial weakness comes with the production element. One might perceive that the Arab literature industry doesn't value itself. But to be fair, it's a chicken and egg syndrome. If there's no demand, how can there truly be a proper supply, let alone a supply of quality? And that is where we see the weak production of books in the Middle East. Arab nations in their aggregate produce books in numbers similar to a single European nation. A population of almost 400 million produced the same quantity as a single nation with 40. And when these books are reviewed, edited, and printed, the outcome is cheap. Cheap in the sense that what is being held tactilely is of low value, barely invested in from a time and effort perspective, not from the writer's side, but from the editorial, printing, and marketing angles. From a purely aesthetic point of view, Arab books look inferior to others that are in their periphery. Of course, one doesn't judge a book by its cover, but nonetheless, people eventually do, especially when the quality of the materials and production include corners being cut left, right, and center. And if the industry doesn't value how Arab books look and feel, then they're also giving off an impression that what is inside might also be inferior. As with other expressive industries like architecture, art, and design, recently there has been a rise in the respect granted and appreciation of literature and its consumption. Writing and reading are on the rise. It is a slow evolution that is indeed encouraging. But its speed is without a sense of urgency, even though this crisis needs urgent attention. And this is where we shouldn't be looking for a solution to this reading crisis. The solution rests elsewhere. It rests with the youngest of Arab generations that are primed for knowledge and in the creation of new habits. They must be the target of all investment and intervention. And it all starts in the homes, with the parents and the siblings that can inspire the youngest of Arab children who should be read to, read with, and ultimately encouraged to read on their own, regardless of what happens at school. A spark needs to be lit to kickstart their hunger for reading. A new Iqra moment, a moment back in antiquity that launched Arabs and Muslims on a journey in becoming the most advanced civilization of their time during the Middle Ages. Arabs and Muslims today require a new journey that triggers their curiosity for knowledge and wisdom, but they also need to recognize and remember how it all began. Read, for your Lord is most bountiful, who taught by the pen, taught humankind what it did not know.